Welcome to the Toronto Real Estate Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about what we're seeing boots on the ground in the fall market. We're definitely off to a sluggish start. I think it's even slower right now than what the stats were showing for the month of September. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up at the end of October. But we are definitely in a very slow market environment for the fall. One of the things where we're seeing the most activity right now, and the driver probably of the market, is the first-time buyers. We're seeing a lot of first-time buyers starting to see value and a bit more affordability as interest rates drop in tandem with falling prices. And we're starting to see having a lot of conversations and seeing a lot of people looking at coming back into the market on the condo side and also on the low-rise side. Today, we have joining us the Queen of Acquisitions, Jessica Spillas.
Hello.
We have Sammy Marasco from Fox Marin. How are you this morning, Sammy?
Fantastic. Thank you, Ralph.
And we have a sleep-deprived Jerome Werniuk joining us as well. Here to talk about the Toronto real estate market in the fall, and more specifically, where we're seeing the most activity, and that is on the first-time buyer side. My name is Ralph Fox. I am the co-founder and broker of record of Fox Marin, and I would be absolutely remiss if at the outset I didn't ask you to please hit that like or subscribe button. And if you have any comments, we'd absolutely love to hear from you down below. But let's keep the comments above the waistline. Okay, guys, let's talk about what we're seeing, maybe just at a very high level in the fall. It's still very early days. We're just hitting about mid-October. There was a lot of expectations of seeing some heightened activity and optimism, both in the economy and the market. Seems to be falling a little flat. What are you seeing, Jess?
Yeah, it's definitely not meeting the expectations that I think both buyers and sellers had going into the fall markets. And looking back historically at the activity we're used to seeing at this time of year. And to your earlier point, yes, first-time home buyers are the dominant driver in the marketplace right now when it comes to who is absorbing the current inventory that we're seeing. And the reason for that is because individuals that own real estate already and are looking to upgrade their situation are having difficulties doing so because they themselves cannot sell their existing asset, primarily at the expected price or terms that they initially desired. And so the first-time buyer is reigning king in this market because they have the flexibility that most other buyers do not. The problem with that is first-time home buyers are coming to the table with all kinds of expectations, thinking that they can get the world. And while it is true that they have increased leverage and terms than we've ever seen before, I think any first-time home buyer out there right now would agree with me that even though there is a lot of inventory on the market, they're still struggling to find that quality property, whether it's in the freehold or condo asset class. And so that is deterring decisions, and people really want to take their time. And when they do find a good opportunity, they can't help but think to themselves, is this the best option I'm going to get, or is there something better out there?
Thank you for that, Jess. Jerome, I'm going to throw this over to you and would love to get your high-level thoughts on what you're seeing this far into the fall market, where the activity is coming from. I know you've had a number of successful clients purchase in the last few weeks. So maybe just give us a high level what you're seeing across the board in the market midway into October for the fall, and then maybe talk a little bit about your take on where we're seeing activity coming from.
I would fully agree with what Jess laid out there. And the hottest category, or I should say the tightest component of the market right now, is the entry-level freehold market. That's sort of $1 to $1.5 million townhouse, semi-detached townhouse. And what I find interesting is a lot of buyers are reading headlines, they're talking to their parents, they're at Thanksgiving dinner, and they hear all of the blended data for the GTA of we're at, 7-8 months of inventory for real estate. And the reality is, if you're going to shop for a semi-detached home in the east end or the west end of the city right now, you're actually dealing with only 2.5 months of inventory. So it's a lot tighter than I think a lot of first-time home buyers really realize until they get into the action and they see a decent property still getting 5+ offers. When you shift up to sort of the $2 million detached price point, that's where sort of the reality of the headlines is very much true. And a lot of inventory is just sitting in that category. And buyers are able to be a lot more aggressive there than they would be in the semi-detached category. And I think to Jess's point, I also agree there's a lot of expectations. And I talked to a lot of agents who said there's going to be a ton of inventory coming on the market through lawyers and mortgage brokers we work with. There's a ton of buyers showing up. And it's just kind of fallen flat after the last couple of weeks that kicked off September. So I would say we're probably looking at this sort of flat line trend to continue for the rest of the fall market here.
Yeah, it's interesting in a lot of what we're seeing. There seemed to be a lot of activity the first 2 weeks of September, and it definitely seemed to fall off as we got into the latter weeks of September. So the start of September was very busy, and it seems to have been tapering off. Where I will sort of tighten up on what you just said, Jerome, but I think we are in agreement, is that first-time buyer low rise is very active. But I would say in and around up to 1.2, maybe 1.25. I'm seeing from 1.25 to 1.7, 1.8, fairly slow. Based on our listings and what we're seeing happening across the market. And then the luxury seems to be still doing okay. Some of the higher price points, we are seeing some pretty nice trades happening. So it is a bit of a mixed bag. And I think it really depends on area to area and property to property. It is very difficult to predict anything right now. And I think that is another trend that we're seeing happening. So Sammy, where are you seeing the most activity with your clients right now on the buy side?
Yeah, to echo both Jess and Jerome, since the start of the year, it's been first-time home buyers. And you're right, Jess, they really don't have anything holding them down. I've noticed a lot of people who have purchased condos in the last 5 years have not only approached me, but the rest of the team to sell their property. And there's that difficulty in jumping from the condo that they thought would appreciate in value to step up to the next ladder rung in the housing market. They're just not able to do because they may have lost money on their condo, or they didn't make the appreciation they were expecting to be able to make that jump. So that's really holding people back. Not to mention, it's just expensive to buy and sell a home. You've got land transfer taxes, which can really stifle someone. Those closing costs you can't put those into your mortgage. So that's something to consider. So yes, first-time home buyers have really taken my heart this year, if you will.
And a little piece of your soul.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the mistakes right now to be avoided by first-time buyers, because they don't know what they don't know, often is the case. And they're trying to figure out how to make maybe the largest purchase in their lives or investment in their lives, and how they navigate that in such a negative environment right now, both with the economy and with the market. Jerome, like what would you say in terms of some of your biggest advice that you would give to somebody starting out thinking about purchasing a property in Toronto?
I'll start with deal hunting, where somebody calls me up and they say, "Hey, Jerome, I heard the market's not good right now. I want you to find me a deal." And I'm like, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" And the reality is, what I think some people call a deal is like, a property where the sellers defaulted on their mortgage, and all of a sudden it's been taken over the bank, and it's being sold off, power of sale. And the reality is, well, the number of those listings has increased. I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen a single one of those that I would ever recommend a client buy. They're generally pretty junky properties that are going to require a lot of dough to go into it. And most of the buyers that I'm working with, which are first-time home buyers, they don't really have the pedigree to take on a home that's really challenged. You got to really know what you're doing to buy a house that needs $400,000 or $500,000 of updates to get it to a livable level. And so I generally will steer people away from looking at deal hunting and buying a house that needs a ton of work up front, unless they really know what they're doing. And so a better approach for a first-time home buyer, and the guidance I give most of my clients, is finding a sweet spot of a home that probably needs some updates and has some upside potential, where you can improve finishes or maybe move a wall around down the road, maybe build an extension on another floor to go to the basement. but you could move in tomorrow and not have to lift a finger for the first couple of years other than your sort of general maintenance. And that sweet spot is generally the right approach for a first-time home buyer to get their feet wet, learn how to own a property without taking on a massive risk of a large project renovation right out of the gate, and not go deal hunting from that perspective.
I think there's a misnomer or misunderstanding between the idea of price versus value. And you could be buying something at a very low price, but it may not have very much long-term value. And I think you should always be focused on the value versus the price within your budget. Jess, what does that mean to you?
I think you told me this is a really great quote. You said, there's no such thing as a deal. There are only opportunities. And I think that couldn't be more true. And to dovetail off of what Jerome was saying, I think one of the biggest mistakes a first-time home buyer or any buyer really makes is they focus on the acquisition costs without thinking about the maintenance costs or the soft costs of the property. And we see this happen all the time, even with condos being a great example, where a condo will trade at a record low price per square foot. And on paper, it might seem like a quote unquote deal. And you look at the maintenance fees of that same condo, and it's well over $1 a square foot, and it's skyrocketing, and it's reached a point of diminishing returns when it comes to its rate of appreciation. And so I think anyone that has tunnel vision and they're not looking at the entire picture as a whole can make a grave mistake by deal hunting and not thinking long term and thinking what the entire cost will be, not to mention their risk level. Because if you are dealing with a home, especially in Toronto, that needs a lot of work, you have to remember that these are mostly 100-plus-year-old homes. And so there is a tremendous amount of risk and unknown issues behind the wall. And as soon as you start knocking things down, you're going to be met with those surprises really quickly. And if you're not prepared, or if you don't have the experience to handle that, it could be a nightmare situation. And that's what we're mostly trying to protect our clients from. Because if you save $100,000 on a home, but now you're spending $200,000 trying to bring it up to a reasonable standard, then all in, it doesn't really look like a good deal, does it?
No, and it looks like you didn't get great value on your purchase. And I think that's the difference. Don't focus on the price, focus on the value that you're getting for the money that you're spending. And I think people are too often focused on the wrong thing. And it's really important. One of the reasons that's really important to have a really good advisor or real estate agent is they should be there to remind you of the value of what you're buying or potentially considering buying versus the actual price. Sammy, talk to me a little bit about our favorite clients who have champagne tastes on a beer budget. What does that mean to you? Describe the personality.
Well, I think misalignment comes to mind
Great
at
word.
the very beginning. Being aligned as whether it's yourself, you and your family, you and your partner, whomever is going and purchasing this property together, everyone needs to be aligned. When there's misalignment, obviously things can just fall apart. Arguments can happen. It's just not a good situation. And going back to the value situation, everybody needs to understand what they're buying and why they're buying. And if you're thinking long-term, you're thinking resale. So when you go to sell, is this going to be a deal to somebody else, or is there going to be value there and someone's going to pay a premium for it, especially if you are putting your time, effort, and energy into renovating or doing anything to create more value in the property?
For sure. But I want to talk more about, I'll give you an example. Somebody reaches out to you and says that they want a 2-bedroom condo in a prime location with a parking spot, an upgraded bathroom and kitchen for $550,000. Does that sound realistic to you?
It does not.
So I think it's one of the things that we face when working with clients is trying to make sure that they get to a point where they understand what is realistic versus what they actually want. Jess, what does that mean to you?
I think it's really important to understand that, especially as a first-time home buyer, you really want to look at this purchase like it's a trading card. And what you want to think about is when I go to trade this car down the road, what asset can I own now that's going to get me the best trade up in the future? And I think those that try to chase the dream home in one singular jump often find that they're met with a lot of surprise issues down the road, because if something does exist underneath the average price point within those relative expectations, likely there's something else going on there. And if I tell everybody this, something seems too good to be true, it's oftentimes it is. And so what I always encourage people to do is just to really lean into climbing the property ladder. And it's not necessarily about getting your dream home right off the bat. It's thinking about this strategically and being willing to start off small with the long-term goal of ultimately getting there. And if you, for example, in the same timeline, if you were to purchase something a little bit more modest that has the opportunity for growth and then go to sell that asset in a few years when the market has recovered, you can be in the category you want it to be from the beginning, but in a whole much better option. And if you try to make that jump to begin with, you're going to be stuck with that asset and likely have difficulty selling it or moving it. And long term, you're going to be much better off if you're thinking about this from a perspective of small jumps so that you can trade up to get the best possible thing long term. If that makes sense.
Exactly.
There's, I'm going to jump in here because I've been dealing with this category of buyers and renters quite a bit recently. And it's a lot of people my age, like in their 30s, that are currently renting. They're making $250,000, $500,000 of household income. And they could go out and buy right now. But what they could afford to buy is a place that they're probably going to outgrow as soon as they have kids. And a lot of those people are turning to the rental market and trying to find something that's not right downtown, not in a condo, a little more residential. And what's really interesting is that there is like no product out there for those tenants. Samantha and I were just working with a client, and then we're working with them for 3 months, and they have a $5,000-$6,000 budget. They want to go find something nice, and there's this huge gap. As soon as you kind of reach $3,500, $3,800, there's nothing in between that and like $6,000 well renovated, really nice home. And there's so many renters that want to fill in that space. And their plan is to go rent a nicer place. They end up spending $5,000 a month. And then they're saving up and jumping into like a $2 million house. And maybe it's not, perfectly turnkey, but it's a home that they could probably live in forever. And what they really want to avoid is having to make all those little jumps and paying the land transfer taxes over again and having to pay real estate agent fees every single time and figure out logistics of buying and selling. And so I think that's a trend that we're going to see continue. The interesting component is, are we going to see developers step up and provide rental properties in those residential neighborhoods to fill the demand of those eventual buyers who are probably not going to buy until their late 30s, but jump straight into the $2 million price point?
It's a real gap because you're talking $1,400, $1,500 a square feet to build that inventory. 1,200 square feet is a $1.8 million cost. So, how do you bridge that gap? It's going to be a problem for a very long time to come. And I don't really see that being resolved. It's just, how do people save up, even at $250,000 household, to buy a $1.82 million property without parental help or some type of an outside win? I mean, it's $400 just to buy groceries in one shop now. How do you get there at a 52% tax rate? I don't know. And so I think it's one of the challenges with affordability is, how do you not make the payments, but how do you come up with that down payment without outside help? It's a real problem that I think we haven't been able to find a solution to in this market. And I think it's going to continue to put pressure on affordability from all standpoints. But it is very challenging to get into a market like Toronto's, for sure. And I think incrementally sometimes may be the only way, or sometimes just making the conscious decision to stay a renter. Okay, so trying to time the market, your favorite topic, Jerome. I know you love to talk about this. I'm saying that in jest. But I'm sure you have good opinions on the subject.
Yeah, no, obviously it's really easy to time the market. You read the newspaper, open it up, put an
Yeah.
offer in, you get it done. No, it's freaking impossible. Like you have your macro data to try and understand what's happened, and generally that's on a monthly basis. And that macro data doesn't mean a whole lot when you're focused on 14 blocks in Midtown and a semi-detached home. All that matters is like the properties that are coming out in that market, how many buyers are going to see them on a weekly basis, how many offers are coming in, where the price points are going. And as soon as you see a comp that is unjustifiable on a spreadsheet that's high, that could trigger all of a sudden a big fear of missing out mentality. And next thing you know, the next property to sell in that pocket is even at an even higher price than it should be. And so the way to time the market, if you will, is to start with a wide search if you're a first-time home buyer. Figure out what it is you want, figure out what you can afford, figure out the area you want to be in, and then monitor that market. Go out to see every single house in South Riverdale every single week. See how many offers come in. Be able to walk into a house and come up with the value in your head before even looking at a spreadsheet. And then as you see those literally like 10 to 20 offers a week in a market, you will be able to get a really good sense of what's going to happen with the next property that comes out. And so when it comes to timing the market, it's not really about macro swings, in my opinion. It's really about the micro focus of the neighborhood to figure out, okay, we looked at this for 2 months. Now is the time to jump in. Do we be really aggressive and try and grind out a deal? Or do we be aggressive on the other side and just go out and pay, knowing that we might be overpaying a little bit for the house, but understanding we're seeing more and more buyers show up. If we come back and try and buy the same property next week, it might be more money.
Jess, timing the market.
I think in a market like Toronto, where we're so strapped for quality supply.
Talk about that for a second, because we look at all the inventory levels and, we look at 7 months across with condos, and we look at 5 months in the Toronto proper and 2.5 months in low rise. Like, tell me more about that.
Well, if you look at what that inventory actually is, it's mostly junk. And it's really held up a mirror to the city, because in the past, people were not as discerning about the types of properties they were willing to buy. They weren't asking the right questions and thinking about the usability of a space or a neighborhood or a building. And now that buyers have increased leverage, they're a lot pickier when it comes to the types of properties they're willing to make that level of financial commitment to, as they should. But what it's done is it's left all of these terrible properties that used to sell without issue in the dust, and they're stacking up against each other. And it's creating a bit of a confusing data point, because buyers are coming to the table going, there's 7 months of inventory. This should be a breeze. And it feels like searching through a dumpster. And so this is why I tell all my clients is, regardless of how the market is performing, whether it's hot or extremely slow, best opportunities tend to sell within a matter of days, because having a quality property with a great layout, natural light, in a good building or on a great street, like that is still a scarce asset. And buyers are willing to still push the boundaries on what it means to acquire that type of asset, because they know the next time they see an opportunity like that, it may be a year from now, it may be 2 years from now, and who knows what the prices will be like at that time. And so I'm always encouraging my clients to not time the market from a performance standpoint, but time it from a perspective of, is this the best house I've seen? And is this the best house I'm going to see? Because I'll tell you one thing, if the market continues to decline and home prices have another $100,000 discount on them, it's not going to help you if the inventory isn't there to satisfy your needs. So focusing more on, is this the best opportunity for me? And really drowning out all the noise of the marketplace in the background can really help reinforce the best decisions where you can be happy in a property. And again, this is a long-term decision. This is not a place where you're going to live for a couple days or even a year. Like, you should always be thinking ideally 5 to 10 years out. And if that's a place where you could be happy for the next 5 to 10 years, from my perspective, nothing else really matters.
100%. It would be really interesting if maybe with the help of AI, we could create two indexes, the junk inventory index and the quality inventory index. Because I think you raised a really good point there in that the downturn in the market has exposed a fundamental problem that has exacerbated with the 20, 30-year bull run that we've had in the market, where people would buy anything, developers could bring anything to market, investors would buy anything as long as it cash flowed, rents were never an issue. And once all of that went away, going back to one of my favorite quotes by Warren Buffett is, when the tide goes out, you see what if people are wearing a bathing suit. And right now we're kind of seeing a bit of an ugly part of Toronto, where we saw all of these properties get built, get bought, get sold, get rented out, and now nobody wants them because they're really not that great. And that's really the story of generally what's compiling a lot of the building up of inventory versus, that little thin crust of what's really considered to be quality at all price points has really exposed a lot about the market and really what's out there. And we are seeing a lot of the junk, as you would say, or garbage heap pile up. And it is interesting because when you're working with buyers, you really start to go through the 300 listings and you're like, okay, here's 3 might be worth looking at. And it really exposes something to the buyers as well, because they're like, I'm getting these listings sent out to me every day, and yet I don't want to see anything. But yet the market is soft. So where do you find the balance? And I think the other thing that you said that was really smart is that this should be a long-term decision. And some of what this downturn has exposed is we've really seen Toronto real estate as an investment vehicle. And it's really now reminding us really what it is, which is a home and a place to live and a place to set your roots long-term. And I think if you're looking at it that way, the market is going to rebound. Is it 6 months from now when interest rates or the overnight lending rate is 50 basis points lower? Is it a year and a half from now when we start to see the spigot of inventory coming offline? Or is it 5 years from now once we've, gotten fully through the other side of the effects of COVID that it's had on the economy and everything else? And, maybe there'll be a new president in the United States and things will be a bit more stable. No one really knows. But if you look at the history of Toronto real estate, these downturns do move through the system. And some would argue that this was a needed clearing so that we can now reset and really re-examine and then move forward from where we were to where we're going. So it will turn around. And I think if you're thinking long-term and you're viewing this as a home and setting roots and financial opportunities for your family and for yourself, you'll view it in a much different way, because at the end of the day, you never know a market has bottomed out until it's on its way back up. And only then can you say, well, that was the bottom, as opposed to, I think this might be the bottom. So it's something that's really important to be thinking about when you're trying to time something that really, really can't be timed and certainly can't be validated until after the fact. Sam, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, it just made me think this past week alone, I was looking at current inventory on the market in the East, because that's where I live and like to focus. Yeah, the lack of quality. It was everything that was left was on a major street, Coxwell, Carlaw, and not in the good pockets of a lot of these streets, or they were chopped up into quasi duplex, triplex, not legals. And the inside, the pictures were a lot of like tenants' belongings, dark photos, fingers in front. And it's just a sign of the
Those darn
times.
fingers in front.
Pictures upside down. Yeah, it was disappointing, but like you said, it's just a sign of the times. It is where we are. And timing the market, really not possible. I think from my perspective, it's speed right now. and how quickly buyers can act. Because like even last night, there was a property that I saw on, it was in the east. It's eluding me right now, Milverton or Strathmore, one of those streets, but it got 6 offers. My clients didn't end up offering, but that's one of not very many that have come up in that area in a while. So the ones that are quality, and really the only thing that was wrong with the home that we could see was that the dishwasher was too small. And immediately we were like, well, we'll just move the dishwasher here, finagle it this way. It might cost you a few $1,000s, but if that's all it takes to get this gorgeous house, beautiful lot, 1 parking spot, tree-lined street, and within budget, then it makes sense. But yeah, quality of inventory, not up to snuff these days.
Absolutely. Okay. And the other thing that is interesting, we talked about this at our team meeting. This is very anecdotal, but there's kind of 2 pushes that we normally see to the fall market. One is the launch, the first couple of weeks of September. We did see a lot of inventory come to market. And then usually things sort of simmer down over the long weekend because people don't want to bring out properties prior to the Thanksgiving long weekend. And now we're back after the long weekend, and we talked about this. Are you guys seeing a flood of inventory come to market, or has it just sort of fizzled and stayed constant?
Definitely seems quite slow. I always am quite vigilant when it comes to keeping track of new listings after any long weekend. It's been pretty disappointing this week. I mean, we're 4 days into it, 3 or 4 days into it, and even my own clients have commented on the lack of quality opportunities that have presented itself this week.
I remember there were times where clients were thinking that MLS wasn't working and sending out the listings, or that their settings were wrong. We've been through periods like that where our clients are reaching out to us being like, something wrong with my settings? Is the MLS not working? So interesting to see that. And it seems like the market maybe is responding to some of the softness we've seen, and people are holding off coming out to market, hoping for greener pastures in the spring. Let's talk about the importance of having great representation. A lot of times we see first-time buyers like reach out on realtor.ca for one of our listings, or think that they can just, figure it out by going to open houses. In this type of market, it is so easy to make a mistake and to set yourself up on a really bad path, because there is so much inventory out there, and because a lot of seller agents are representing their sellers and not necessarily you as a buyer walking in the door at an open house. Jess, or actually I'll throw this one to Sammy. Why is it so important to have good representation, and how is that a mistake sometimes that buyers can make, thinking that they can just figure this out on their own?
Yeah, well, it's so important. There's just so much information to weed through. Like, how do you know what's right, what's wrong? Having someone with a strategy and a process and the information really organized so that they can present that to you so it makes sense in your mind. It's super important. And yes, we definitely have people coming to us, to the selling agent, asking if they can be represented. I've had 2 questions about that in the last month, I would say. And I explained to them we can't do that. Not only are there RICO rules now in place, but it just doesn't make sense from their best interest and our sellers' best interests. Everyone needs their own representation so that they have everything that they need and there's no games being played. I don't know how someone can factfully and truthfully say, I am representing both buyer and seller interests in this transaction. They can't, even though they say they can.
In Vancouver or BC, it is illegal. You can't do multiple representation, but in Ontario, you can. And there's many different forms of representations that can happen when trying to sell a property as a listing agent. So I just wanted to correct that. But at Fox Marin, it is something as listing agents that we feel is a conflict of interest, because how can you necessarily negotiate the highest price for a seller and at the same time get the lowest price for a buyer? I feel the only person that really wins is the agent trying to double in the commission in most instances. And so they're very difficult transactions to bring across the table. It's in rural areas, sometimes it's a little more commonplace, but I do find that there's a reason why it was banned, in my opinion, in BC for good reason. And I do think it should be banned here because a buyer clearly needs to understand the pros and cons to a property in conjunction with a deep understanding of their personal financial situation and their goals. And it's very difficult to do that when you are representing a listing. Jerome, going back to the importance of just trying to walk in a door at an open house or a realtor.ca lead and just trying to figure this out. Like, what are the pitfalls with that? And why do you think it's important to interview other agents?
A lot of the general public, particularly first-time buyers, have a negative perception around real estate agents, and probably for good reason, because the majority of res agents are really bad. And when the majority of an industry is not good, people look at the average. And so I think when I go out, we have somebody who reaches out about one of our listings just off the internet, or they just call us out of the blue and you go meet them. There's generally this kind of crossed arm body language, don't try and trick me into anything vibe you're getting back from the person. And I think that I find at least that what is usually disarming for them is when you're not just selling them and saying this property is amazing and all the best features, but you're just talking in general about the market. You're asking them questions about their situation and kind of giving them even keel advice. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe not every real estate agent is this scumbag, and a relationship can be built off of that. I do think, though, that whether you're a first-time home buyer or you're selling a $5 million property, it is important to interview agents. You do like 1, 2, 3 transactions in residential real estate in your entire life for most people. And so how are you going to know by meeting one person if they're capable, if they're a good fit for you, if they know what they're doing? I think it's really important to do as much research as you can. Look at reviews, talk to other friends, and who have they used, what's their experience been like. And if you sit down on 3 different calls with 3 different agents and hammer them with questions about what's happening in the market, throw a situation at them, ask them how they would handle it, press them, be like, why are you the right agent for me? And over the course of 3 calls, you're probably going to determine, 1, who is actually good out of the 3, and 2, if you feel comfortable as hiring them as your consultant for this massive move that you're going to make. So the more you talk to more agents, the more you're going to understand. And good agents are not desperate for business. They're not going to try and trick you into using them. They're also looking out, is this a good fit for me? Like, I only have so many hours in the week. I only can do so many transactions in a year. So like, do I want to work with this person who's going to be, completely mean to me or not respectful of my time? And on the agent side, we're in a fortunate position at Fox Marin where we have more business than we can handle. And so we get the option sometimes to say, I don't know if I want to work with that person that just called me an asshole. So it kind of goes both ways on that side. And if you're looking for a real estate agent, interview them, figure out if it's a good fit. And it's kind of like a bit of a dating situation where you feel each other out.
Speaking of dating, Jerome, I don't know who could be mean to you. I really don't. I felt a pang in my heart when you said that. But I do think it's interesting that NAR, National Association of Realtors, did a study, and I think they found something like 75% of buyers would hire the first agent that they spoke to. And where that presents itself as a real problem to me is I think people will spend more time planning a 2-week vacation in Cuba than they will in terms of thinking about how they're going to line their ducks up in a row to make the biggest investment or transaction in their lives that could set them up for their future. And I think it's really important, especially like I'm just trying to reach out to the home buyer who's made it this far in this conversation, but respect the process and the investment and all of the things that could go wrong, and really, really do your due diligence on trying to find somebody that you feel that you can trust and communicate with that can help you set yourself up for the future while avoiding all of the pitfalls that are out there. And that can only come through a lot of research and a lot of due diligence and a lot of conversations. And there's an old saying that, you can't pay somebody to do your push-ups for you. You have to go out and find the right fit for you so that you can advocate for yourself and have somebody who can advocate for you right beside you. Jess, any last final words about the importance of having good representation and doing your due diligence?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'd like to add to everyone else's contributions is that trust is fundamental in any working relationship. And so there needs to be trust on both sides. And without that, it can make the process far more grueling than it needs to be. And I think anyone that has gone through the process of searching through a home will tell you that your relationship with your agent can sometimes mimic that of a therapist. And
Yes.
so having somebody in your corner that can advocate for you and get to the bottom of what is important to you and what you need, because let's face it, most people don't really know what's best for them. They think they know. And if you are working with somebody that is just going to say yes to every single one of your requests without really critically thinking about what is in your best interest and getting to the heart of why you think you need what you need, it just is the difference between you doing this really yourself with the help of somebody pushing a paper and you working with an expert that will give you the best possible outcome in a way that you would have never come up with or even fathomed on your own.
100%. A good agent should most likely be talking you out of offering on properties more so than offering on properties. I
100%.
think it's really important to find somebody who has your back. Let's talk about, and this is something that I find really interesting, is the emotional roller coaster of the process, going back to being a part-time psychologist. We had on this podcast, Corey and I, a friend of ours, and she is a psychiatrist and she is the head doctor or head psychologist at the walk-in clinic for Mount Sinai. And in our conversation, or I think it was like after it, I talked about developing a course for real estate agents on how to counsel clients from a psychological standpoint, something that's totally missed at RIA. But like, how do you talk to somebody when they're freaking out? Or how do you talk somebody down and bring them back to seeing things rationally? I think it's a real miss. And I think it's something that's so part of what we do and so part of, I think, what you should be looking for when you're hiring an agent is somebody who can help you take the emotions out of what is a very emotional process. And I think it's one of the things that you should be thinking about when you're looking to hire somebody is how emotional of a process is this, and how I've seen some of the most unemotional, stoic people, clients, buyers literally be brought to tears or having their handshake, being so nervous throughout the process. How emotional is this, and how important is it to have somebody who can help you think through the process rationally and get over your fears? Jess.
I think everybody always underestimates how emotional this process is. I mean, a classic example that I see every time is when I tell our buyer clients that this property is outside of your budget, it's artificially listed low, and they think, well, let's just throw out an offer. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? And they neglect to really understand how much of a toll emotionally it takes when you go through all of the legwork of submitting an offer, putting together the paperwork, sometimes going as far as getting your check, and then really imagining yourself in this home and then not getting it. I mean, we've seen people just straight up mourn the loss of homes for days at a time, or want to just throw in the towel altogether because it's been so devastating for them. I mean, I've literally sent clients flowers for losing out on a home because they were so upset. It's easy to fall into that trap, but our job as experts and professionals is to help them think logically in an environment where most decisions are being driven by their emotions.
This was like 7 or 8 years ago. Like, your story was very much, and I understand that, where you're looking to buy a house and you're thinking about your future and where little Billy's room is going to be and what color you're going to paint the walls and what it's going to be like when you wake up and you have a coffee sitting on your back terrace and how amazing that will be in your future and all of that. and then it's literally like ripped away from you
Mhm.
in 30 seconds at 11:30 on a Tuesday night when somebody else got the property for $5,000 more. And it's like, it is kind of like the loss of your future vision.
Yeah.
And so that's one aspect to it. And the other is, I was just thinking when you were talking from a financial standpoint, I had this client, this goes back like maybe 10 years ago, and she introduced me to her boyfriend, and her boyfriend was an undercover cop on the SWAT team. And every time I'd meet him to look at properties, he'd like show up in this, like, he was like right out of Central Casting. He had this big truck with these wheels, and he'd always like huge wheels, like totally jacked up. And he'd be wearing these aviator glasses. And I'd see him, and it would be like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He'd have a coffee in his hand, and he'd be like, "Did you read the newspaper last night?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Well, I don't really read the newspaper, but yeah. He's like, "Did you see what happened?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "We took down the triad." And I'm like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was the second guy in the door. And that happened at 4:30 this morning. And I was like, whoa. So he's telling me like all these kind of crazy interactions that he's having. And he very much was that kind of macho guy. Anyways, he ended up buying a pre-construction condo on the East End. And him and his girlfriend were there when he was signing the checks, because you have to sign those checks. His hands were literally shaking, and he was so white. And she was just looking at him going, "You're such a the whole time." And his fear was financial, because the commitment that you have to make, and the size of the check, and the deposits, and the money, and the risk, and the liability, like, these are really, really big transactions, and they're so representative of so much of people's stuff. Either it's their vision of their future, the relationship with their spouse that often comes up, and real estate is sometimes a fix for a falling apart relationship. One of the psychological things we experience as realtors, or sometimes it's just the money, and there's so much tied in with money, and writing checks, and what that means, and all kinds of stuff get associated with these type of transactions, and it can be extremely, extremely, extremely emotional. And Sammy, like, I'll give a little context to our viewers. Prior to getting into real estate, you were an ICU nurse for over 10 years. And I have the utmost respect for that profession, maybe more so than any other profession, including realtors. And I'm sure you've seen the gambit. Like, how has that helped you or prepared you for working in Toronto real estate?
Yeah, that's a good correlation there. Well, when I was on the Code Blue team, we did what's
Oh
called
God, every time you
simulations.
hear code blue, that's a bad thing in a hospital, right?
Yeah, could mean
It's like,
someone's possibly having a heart attack, or they're not breathing, or to explain to our viewers, I'm sure everybody knows. But in order to prepare as the team, we would do simulation code blues. So we would be in a room, there would be a dummy mannequin on a table, there'd be a scenario, and we would have time to think, make decisions, and act. When in a real situation, you don't have that opportunity. You have to act fast, and you have to be able to calm yourself down, take a breath, and think. And when everybody's yelling, or there's someone blue in front of you, you really need to focus. So, to again remove that emotion that we've been talking about, and think logically, what are my next steps? It comes with practice, and it comes with doing things when you are not stressed out. And what I really loved about when I joined Fox Marin, hearing that we did mock offers, I thought that was a great way to prepare, especially first-time homebuyers who have never gone over the paperwork before. It really allows the buyers to get a handle on, for instance, an offer night situation where emotions can be running high. And when you're in that environment, you're not asking questions that should be asked. You're not thinking clearly, and you might make silly decisions because you're not thinking rationally. So those mock offers, which we basically bring a buyer through a offer night and explain all of the contract paperwork so that they see how it unfolds and how everything happens, but they're able to take a second, think, ask the questions they want to ask, and they've got enough wherewithal that they can pay attention when you're talking to them, instead of be over here or over there not paying attention, to where they make silly decisions. So I think that's really cool. I mirror those mock offers to doing those simulations in a code lab, if you will. So I thought that was really cool.
We should call them Code Blue.
Yeah. I like that. Well, I had actually just like thinking recently that on Saturday, I ended up helping a client buy property, and I've been at this 4 years now, and you just kind of build up muscle memory. And so you kind of forget the things that you do. But talking about this now, our role, as experienced agents is to try and lay out what the possible scenarios are in the future for our clients. So if they're interested in a property and it's been on the market for 2 weeks and they're kind of interested in offering, but they're not really sure, I like to propose to them, say it's 8 p.m. tonight, and I call you and I say, somebody's put a bid in. I want you guys to talk about how you would have that conversation now and like think through how you're going to react to that so you can emotionally and mentally prepare yourself for a scenario that's very likely going to happen. And so when it does happen, you can make logical, rational decisions. And so usually at the end of a tour, if we're interested in a property, I'll give them a hypothetical scenario to chat over dinner about or have wine that night and go through. And so when it comes down to it and that actual scenario arises, they've already rehearsed this thing in their head, just like a mock offer, and they're going to be able to make much better decisions. And I think all of us do that in some capacity of, preparing our clients. And we can only really do that because we've been through so many transactions that we know how these things generally play out.
Awesome. I think repetition is such a good way of getting people ready for when the moment comes, how to actually execute and move through the emotions, being able to remind themselves of why they're doing what they're doing and how to get to the other side of it. Bank of mom and dad. I mean, if you're a first-time buyer, there's a high probability, knowing how difficult it is to get to a deposit, that you're going to need your parents' assistance, at the very least moral support in the vast majority of first-time buyers that are out there. How does that play into it? Because it adds another dynamic. Like, people don't necessarily think about it, but usually something comes with the check or the financial backing, and expectations, family drama, control. Even though everything is on the up and up and theoretically for the right reasons, you start to see a lot of different dynamics play out. And if you're a first-time buyer, it's really important to be thinking about these things, if at all possible, in advance. What does that mean to you, and how do you see that play out?
I think one common theme I see when purchasers are coming to the table with the money that their parents are giving them, or really anyone other than themselves, is they tend to be a little bit more flippant with the decisions that they're making. And I'm oftentimes having to tell them to slow down, whether that correlates to the fact that they attain the down payment a lot easier than trying to save up for it on their own. I don't know. But the one thing I see a lot is whenever there is financial backing or help, buyers tend to not think through the decisions that they're making in the same capacity as somebody that has saved years for the same amount of money. And so just really trying to support them and advocate for them by making sure they're not making bad decisions because they're a little bit too hasty in how quickly they're willing to make this type of financial commitment without fully understanding what that means.
And usually there's a point where somebody reaches out to us, somebody gets referred to us, they're a first-time buyer, we end up working with them, and then we've had no contact with their parents, and then their parents show up for the first showing. And it's a real moment for the buyer, it's a real moment for the agent, and it's a real moment for the parent. And it's really important that the buyer shows its parents that it chose well in terms of the representation. It's important that the parent sees that their child is not working with an idiot who's trying to just take care of themselves and doesn't know what they're doing. And it's a moment for the agent to show the parents that they actually know what they're doing and they'll advocate for the child's best interest. Jerome, has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, it's all like literally all the time. It's my favorite. I have many stories of mom and dad showing up for tour number 3 or 4 once we've kind of started to get closer. And right out of the gate, it's that same body language I was talking about. Somebody meets you, arms crossed and like kind of furrow the brow looking down, and they ask you a skill testing question. And it's like, so Jerome, what's this house worth? Be something like that. And then after an answer is given, roadblock number 2 comes up and it's like a tougher question. And it's like, so Jerome, what's your take on the market right now? And then like the third question comes up. And eventually by the end of that first tour, in pretty much every instance in my experience, they're like, okay, pass the test. We'll listen to Jerome's advice. And like, this is now open discussion and everybody is on the same team. I've been kind of allowed in, but it's good. That's what parents are there for. They're there to protect their kids. And when my kids go out and buy a house one day, if they do, I'm absolutely going to be out there with my arms crossed, grilling the real estate agent they're using.
Maybe they'll use you, Jerome.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. A little too close to home.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it happens all the time, and I think it's actually really good. I think parents should come out, and particularly if there's going to be family help involved, everybody should be on the same page. And I have a lot of conversations with clients who say there's a possibility my parents might be helping, or an aunt and uncle, and we have a lot of open dialogue of like when to have conversations about it, how to handle those conversations with family, where to be at in their search process before talking about it. Because for a lot of parents, they're like, I'm willing to help. There's no dollar figure attached at the beginning. They're just saying, I'm here to help. And so the kid's kind of confused. What's my budget? And once we get to a place of like, this is the type of home we're looking at, we found one that's actually interesting. Quite often, that's the right time to have the next conversation with family about like, okay, we found a home. This is why we like it. We looked at 40 homes. We really know what we're talking about now. And if we wanted to go buy this is how much help we would need. That's usually the right time to have that like open conversation about getting the bank of mom and dad's help.
Awesome. And it's kind of like if you're interviewing agents, the way you meet a girl and you're, okay, this is the one to bring back to my parents. Like, is this a real estate agent I can bring back to my parents to show them that I'm not an idiot and that I've found somebody who can represent me and I can show my parents that I'm capable of handling this and I'm capable of making the right decisions and putting the right pieces in place so that you can now stroke me a check for $250,000. So it's something a buyer should be thinking about early days, especially if their parents are involved. Is this an agent I can bring home to mom and dad? That could be the title for this podcast. Who knows? Anything is possible. And Sammy, what about when parents say they're not going to be involved, but they're actually completely involved in dictating the entire process?
Yeah, I've seen that a few times.
Yes, you have.
And I think reminding them to even after every showing, hearing both, everybody wants to share their opinion, and encouraging everyone to be aligned and go home and discuss what they liked, what they didn't like, and to remember who is going to be living in this condo or this home. All too often, I see that maybe a mom or a dad has an opinion about a place, and it might not have anything to do with the function. It's just a personal taste. And we have to remind them, well, who's living in the property? Or the buyer, their child will say, I'm living here. You're not living here. You don't have to worry about that. So again, the alignment piece is very important, and focusing on the value, bringing them back to that versus their opinions about color or the way the valance looks in the blinds. Like, those things can be changed. Some of these parents have been in the same home for 30, 40, however long. So they also need to realize layouts are different in condos. You may have a powder room next to a kitchen. I know that's a no-no in some cultures and religions, or the feng shui might not be perfect, but again, it's bringing them back to who is buying this condo, who will be living here, and making sure they're all aligned. It's not an easy job, but.
No, it is not. Well, I think we've had a pretty good conversation sort of talking about the position of first-time buyers and how they can start thinking about the process, especially if they're in the early stages of looking to purchase. There's a lot of things to be thinking about that might not become apparent until you're in it. So hopefully some of our viewers have seen value in this discussion. Is there anything you guys would like to just add to wrap this up for somebody who's a first-time buyer who's thinking about getting in the market or is ready to take the next step and find that real estate agent or partner to help them through the process?
I really wanted to emphasize the word of process. This is very much not a short one, but a very complex process. And what you think you want today may evolve and change, and that's all right. And I think leaning into that and trusting the journey and trying to educate yourself as much as possible along the way is the advice that I would give to anyone, regardless of the stage they're at in their home buying journey.
Jerome?
The first purchase you're going to make will be the easiest purchase in your real estate future. When you're trying to buy and sell down the road, when there's kids involved, when there's school districts, it gets more and more complicated. And so really don't pull the trigger early. Take your time, learn as much as you can, walk through as many properties as you need to. Don't feel any pressure to rush and make good, confident decisions, and you'll end up in a good spot.
Sammy, any last final words of wisdom?
Yeah, you really get what you put into it. So the more time and effort you put in, the more you'll get out of it.
Amazing. And there you have it from some of my colleagues at Fox Marin. Boots on the ground if you're a first-time buyer trying to navigate the market and the process. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's really important to set yourself up from the outset. Everybody, Jerome, Jessica, Sammy, thank you guys so much for spending some of your Thursday morning with us, and we really appreciate your time and your valuable insight, and it's always, always, always a pleasure to see your smiling faces. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Likewise, thank you.
And
Thanks,
to our
Rob.
viewers, thank you for making it to the end of our conversation, presuming that you did. If you have any comments, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. And please be sure to hit that like or subscribe button. Thank you for joining.